Show you this again, if this machine will turn on. The book of Samuel, we're going into 1 Samuel chapter 4 today. And the book of Samuel, my goodness, this is all frozen up. What's going on here? Let me try this again. Here we go. There we go. So just quickly, the book of Samuel is going to continue to highlight this truth. I don't know how often I'm going to put this up, but as we go through the pages of Samuel, we'll run into this on almost every page of this story, that Yahweh will make the weak strong, the weak who trust and obey Him. He'll make the barren, the feeble, the insignificant, like Hannah and Elkanah, her husband. He'll make them, those trusting and obedient ones, fertile and strong. And at the same time, we'll see Him continue to take the strong and the privileged and the powerful and knock them down because they don't trust and obey Him. And we'll see this over and over through the story, through the events that 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel bring out. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, which is where we are here, we're going to see Israel take the Ark of the Covenant into battle. They're going to use this divine, and we'll talk more about the Ark in a few minutes, but they're going to use this holiest of all spiritual relics on earth as a good luck charm. That's exactly what they do. And they will take the Ark of the Covenant out of the tabernacle, out from its holy place, the Holy of Holies, and they'll take it into battle. And God will allow the ark to be captured by the Philistines, a Gentile warring nation against Israel. We'll talk about the Philistines in just a second, but that's the crux of this. You will see strong and powerful men. Look what it says on the board. Yahweh will make the strong and powerful who do not trust and obey Him barren, weak, and feeble. And we will see by the end of this story that Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, the high priest, will die. God will take their lives in battle. They're the most privileged two boys in Israel, the children of the high priest, and God's going to kill them both on the same day in battle because of their distrust and disobedience in Him and allowing this ark to go out of the Holy of Holies and into the battlefield, not where it was designed to be, not what it is. And to whom much is given, you know the rest of the story, much is expected. And to these two strong and powerful, privileged men, we'll see their demise here. And Eli, the high priest, who was in charge of that tabernacle, will also die when he realizes that the Ark of the Covenant has been captured by Gentiles. So they will all die. Eli and his two boys, Hophni and Phinehas. The second half of what it says on the board. While the first half, Samuel, unfortunately, will be not heard of again for 3 chapters. We see in chapters 4, 5, and 6, Israel doing things their own way without Yahweh, without God, without seeking God's approval, seeking God's direction, seeking God's guidance. Here we see Israel do things their own way, and we see the disaster that comes from that. We can learn a lot from it. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, let's get into the chapter. It says, "Thus the word of Samuel came to all Israel." It's the only time you'll read the man's name for the next 3 chapters. And all this is a tie-in to the last chapter. The word of Samuel came to all Israel. Remember at the very end it says that all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, the city in the south, the northern city of Dan, the southern city of Beersheba, it says all Israel knew that Samuel was a prophet of God. And so it ties the 2 chapters together here, if you will. Thus the word of Samuel, the word through God or of God through Samuel came to all Israel. And then it goes into this battle scene. It talks about a new event. It says Now Israel went out to meet the Philistines in battle and camped beside Ebenezer, a word that means the stone of help. We'll read this word Ebenezer again. Interestingly, when God says when Jesus says it's to your advantage that I go away, because if I go away, I'll send the helper. In the Greek, it's the word parakletos, but the Hebrew word for helper is ezer. It's the same word that God used in the Garden of Eden when Adam named all the animals, but he couldn't find anyone that was in keeping with his own kind. And so God put Adam to sleep. And what did he call Eve? He said, I will make you a helper, an ezer, E-Z-E-R. Ezer is the word. God the Holy Spirit is the helper, the ezer. The woman is the helper to the man. A big word, ezer. Eben is the word for stone. So it means the stone of help. And Joshua used it as that, the stone of help, when he named this place. So the Egyptians, the Israelites, are camped at this city called Eben Ezer, while the Philistines camped in Aphek. This is known as the Battle of Aphek, this which is what we're about to read about. The Philistines here, we have to talk about them just for a minute. I don't think we ever have stopped for any length of time and talked about who these Philistines are. It's important because they will show up in the stories of Israel almost until the end. You read about the Philistines in Ezra and Nehemiah. They are around for generations and generations and generations as the evil enemy of Israel. But who are they? Let's ask a few questions and answer a few questions about the Philistines before we go further into the story. Who are they and where did they come from? I'll tell you, they're not Jews, they're Gentiles. Entirely Gentiles, not Jewish blood, not Hebrew, not children of Abraham. They are Gentiles who came from Crete, C-R-E-T-E, the island of Crete, the Isle of Crete. Most likely Crete. It could be some other, I'll show you a couple of maps in a minute. It could be some other Aegean island, but they definitely came from a place called Kaftor. I'll show you that in the scriptures in just a minute too. Kaftor, C-A-P-H-T-O-R. We have scripture after scripture that says the Philistines are from Kaftor and they made their way to the land of Israel. There were two waves, at least two waves, major waves. One in about 2000 BC, about the time Abraham was moving into the land of Canaan. Also, these sea peoples were invading Israel. In the area of Israel known today as, anybody know? The Gaza Strip. This is where the Philistines camped out. This was their home. This is still the Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath. The cities of the Philistines are still in the southern areas of Israel around the Gaza Strip. That's where these Philistines are. Isn't that an interesting little fact? The second wave of Philistines, these sea peoples that were migrating to Israel, came in about 1200 BC, which is about the time that Joshua was leading Israel into the Promised Land. So there we have it, 2000 BC, 1200 BC. Let me show you a couple of verses. In Jeremiah chapter 47, verse 4, who are the Philistines? They aren't native to the land. Let me say it this way. They weren't there first. You get the point? They weren't there first. It wasn't their land that Israel invaded. It was Israel's promised land that the Philistines invaded. In Jeremiah 47, verse 4, it says, on account of the day that is coming to destroy all the Philistines, to cut off from Tyre and Sidon every ally that is left, for the Lord is going to destroy the Philistines. And I showed you this because this is what it says, the remnant of the coastland of Kaftor. These are sea peoples. They're brigands. They're sailors that have come across an island to land on the coast of Israel. In Amos 9, verse 7, Amos chapter 9, verse 7, God is speaking to Israel, but this is what he says, are you not as the sons of Ethiopia to me, O sons of Israel, declares the Lord. And this is what he says about the Philistines. Have I not brought up Israel from the land of Egypt, and have I not brought up the Philistines from Kaftor? Very clear that they are from this place called Kaftor, and the people that study these ancient things think, probably right, that Kaftor is the Isle of Crete. There's a better map in just a second. Don't panic. It has bigger letters. But this little green guy right here in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea is Crete. This is the Aegean Sea right here. This is Greece, Turkey, Asia Minor. So it could be any of these islands in here, but it's probably Crete given the name. Just to give you an idea of where Israel is and where they migrated to, they went from this island right across to the southern coast of Israel. Now, I always show you a map, and I'm about to show you that's the size of that little red box. Let me show you what I mean. This map right here that we see all the time is the size of that little red box. Israel is just a postcard of a nation. It's a tiny little thing in the area in which it is. So in this area, though, you'll see that the Philistines have their own territory here. There's a line of demarcation, and that's where this battle is taking place. Up here where Aphek is and where the other town is where the Jews are. But you see the cities, Gaza, here's the Gaza Strip in this area right here today. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. There was another inland town called Gath, and we'll talk about those towns as we move forward. How did they acquire the coastland? You say, okay, they came from the coast, but who was there and how did they take over the land? The Bible tells us these things. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 23, it talks about this people called the Avim. You never hear about them in the Bible. Why is that? It's because the Philistines killed them and took their land. It says, and the Avim who lived in villages as far as Gaza, the Kaphtorim, the Im is plural, the Kaphtorim, the people from Kaphtor, the Kaphtorim who came from Kaphtor destroyed them and lived in their place. So you get an idea from the scriptures of where the Philistines came from this island of Crete, and how it is that they came to own the coastland. They were simply stronger than the people that were there. They destroyed them and took their land. So when you ask the question, who stole land from who? It was them who destroyed people. But don't forget this verse. God says, have I not brought up Israel from the land of Egypt? And have I not brought up the Philistines from Kaphtor? God has allowed this. God has moved these peoples, I'm sure, to teach Israel a lesson, because he uses the Philistines over and over and over in Israeli history to punish the Jews for disobedience. For many, many years, they were his nation of punishment. They are the ones that he used until later Assyria and Babylon got in on the act. So more maps. There's Crete. I've circled it. There's Israel. I'm going to show you a map that's a little tighter here. You can see the Aegean Sea. You can see Greece. Some familiar words, names to Bible people. Thessaloniki, Thessalonica, but it's Thessaloniki. The Philippians or Philippi is up here. Berea is right here. Of course, the Colossian church is down here. Not the Colossian church, the Corinthian church in Corinth. But anyway, there you have Crete down at the bottom. Circled it again. There's the island of Crete that the people of Philistia, the Philistines, are thought to be from. This ancient name of Crete would be then Crete, Kaphtor. The ancient name of Crete. Better drink some water. Tongue's not lubricated. The ancient name of Crete, then, according to archaeologists and those types, is this city, Kaphtor. The main cities, I'll say one more thing about the Philistines. Their main cities, and they remain their main cities all through the stories of the Old Testament. I named some of them. Gaza, right there, coastal town. Someone asked me the other day, is Gaza really on the coast? Look at it. You have a sea people that came from an island, and being sea people, they wanted to land on the sea, and they didn't move inland. They stayed on the coast. Gaza, the other city, Ashkelon, and you see Ashkelon right here, just a little bit north of Gaza. You'll still see these names on a map today. Ashdod right there. This thing just died. I had my finger in front of it. You know what? Like putting on an act up here. But here, the Philistines. Ashdod is another name of their towns. Gath, G-A-T-H, Gath is another one of their towns. Ekron is another one of their towns, E-K-R-O-N. But that is the territory of the Philistines, and you can see how sizable it is beside all these other tribal territories of Israel. They were a lot of people in a decent-sized piece of land in Israel, and God would use them over and over. I mentioned the name Gath. Can anybody think of a famous Philistine from the city of Gath or Gath? There's one that's more famous than anybody. All of you know the name. Yeah, Goliath is from the Philistine city of Gath. A champion, 1 Samuel 17, we'll get to him eventually. A champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. A span is about 18 inches. Goliath was 9 foot 9 inches tall. That's what we're dealing with in Goliath. 9 foot 9 inch tall giant Philistine from the city of Gath. Another couple of facts. What did they bring with them? We're looking at archaeology. We're looking at movements of people from an island to a mainland that's along a coast. Okay, good enough. But what did they bring with them that was evil? They brought their god, Dagon, D-A-G-O-N, is the national saint, the patron saint of the Philistines. And this is the best guess of what they interpreted this god to be. Remember, they came from an island. They're sea peoples. And so their god was half human. The torso was a human torso, but he had the legs. He looks like a mermaid, doesn't he? He had a fish lower body and a man upper body. He was most likely a fish god, a god that would give the sea peoples fish to eat. But isn't it interesting, when they came over to Philistia, to the land of Israel, he became a grain god. Dagon was a god of agriculture and a god of grain, like wheat and barley. He was a grain god. So they altered their god from being a fish god to being a grain god, because they didn't need as much fish anymore, but they needed the crops. The land, all of a sudden, that they had, the most fertile land of Israel, they needed it to grow grain. So they just shifted their god from being just a fish god to being a grain god. Now, isn't that interesting that they get to determine what their gods are in charge of? It's a crazy system. Must be nice to be able to just change your god. Well, that's exactly what these Philistines did. The Philistines were more powerful than Israel for a major reason, and the reason was they knew how to smelt metal. They had they were higher technologically advanced in metallurgy, and so they had swords and spears and things when Israel didn't. Look what the scripture says again in 1 Samuel 13. We'll get to this soon. The Philistines were powerful. They were controlling almost like the blacksmith union, if you will. And they weren't allowing the blacksmiths, they weren't allowing Israel to have any blacksmiths. It says, now no blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So the Philistines had a power over Israel because of their military might here. And this is what it says about Israel and how dependent on the Philistines they were. It says, so all Israel went down to the Philistines, each to sharpen his plowshare, his mattock, his axe, or his hoe. It wasn't that Israel didn't have the metal. They didn't know how to put an edge on it. They didn't know how to do that stuff, and the Philistines did. They could work metal, and the Israelites had no blacksmiths. So the Philistines had an advantage. As a matter of fact, when you get down to war, the only people that had swords and spears in the days that Saul went against the Philistines, the Bible says, the only people that had swords and spears were Saul the king and his son, the general named Jonathan. Nobody else had them. because the Philistines had a corner on the market. Isn't it interesting? A monopoly on metallurgy and blacksmith. Even all the way back then, this market economy was being driven by whoever was the strongest. Very interesting. Great advantage over the Israelites because of their metallurgy, the ability to work metal. Enough about the Philistines. That's who they are. That's where they came from. I just want you to know it because they won't go away for a long, long time. So verse 1. The word of Samuel came to all Israel, merely ties the two together. Israel went out to meet these sea peoples who had come to their land. They went out to meet the Philistines in battle and camped beside Ebenezer, while the Philistines camped in Aphek. Another map to show you what's going on here, where they are. This dotted line is this line of demarcation here. Here you see a dotted line, the Philistine territory on the left, Jewish territory on the right. And you see Shiloh here, which is where the Jewish tabernacle was, where the Ark of the Covenant resided in the Holy of Holies. And here you see the two cities. So Israel is on their side in Ebenezer, the stone of help, and the Philistines are right across an imaginary dotted line border in Aphek. That's what's going on here. They're lined up for battle. Their armies are ready to fight. In verse 2, the Philistines are pushing eastward. You can see the dotted line, and what does every nation want? More land. And that's why the Philistines are trying to push eastward to destroy Israel and gain more land. It says in verse 2, the Philistines drew up in battle array to meet Israel. The fight is on. When the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 Jews on the battlefield. So Israel goes out, the chosen people of God, go out into battle against these Gentile worshipers of this false god Dagon. And the Jews, 4,000 men of Israel, are killed. Of course, superior weaponry, as we said, swords and spears sharpened by these smiths. In Philistine, Israel didn't have it. But what you don't see in the story here is the fact that Yahweh is superior as the one true God, the only God. Obviously, Yahweh is superior to the Canaanite god Dagon, but the Israelites don't turn to Yahweh for help. You don't see Israel going before the high priest asking, should we go into battle? What should we do? Who should lead us into battle? They don't ask a question of Yahweh. They simply go into battle when the Canaan or the Philistines come up against them. Verse 3, when the people came into the camp, here's where things go even further south. They went into battle without asking Yahweh what to do, how to do this. And now the elders of Israel come up with a harebrained scheme. When the people came into the camp, this is the defeated army, the elders of Israel, who were supposed to lead people. Aren't the old people supposed to be the ones with all the wisdom, with all the proper counsel? This is what the elders of Israel said. They question, they say, why has Yahweh defeated us today before the Philistines? They mention his name, but notice they don't bring offerings, they don't bring sacrifice, they don't go to Shiloh to find out from the high priest, what have we done wrong? What is our sin? Certainly there's a problem in Israel and our relationship with Yahweh, or else we would have been victorious in battle. For some reason, Yahweh has allowed 4,000 of our sons to die. And this is their scheme. Let us take for ourselves from Shiloh the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh. We'll carry it into battle, that it may come among us and deliver us, that it, the Ark, might deliver us from the power of our enemies. So the elders here think that taking the Ark of the Covenant physically, picking up the golden box and taking it to the battlefield will shield them somehow and bring them good luck. Certainly we'll win if we have our relic, our religious relic, in front of us. Not our God, our relic. The holiest piece of furniture on all earth. That's what they think. Again, they're not praying to Yahweh here. They're not seeking an answer to this defeat. They've simply come up with this plan that if we take the holiest item that we have, that represents the very presence of Yahweh among Israel, if we take this into battle as a good luck charm, we'll win. Just because we have this box with us. The tabernacle. I put Jerusalem on this map so you'd know where it was in comparison to everything else. Here's the Israeli army at Ebenezer. And here's the Jewish army, or the Philistine army, lined up at Aphek for this battle. But the tabernacle, just a word about the tabernacle. The Israelites, led by their elders, think that going into this tent and going into the back part of the tent into the Holy of Holies will satisfy, somehow be a good luck charm for them. And certainly Yahweh will give them the battle if they carry the holiest relic with them. It says here in verse 4, so the people sent to Shiloh. What did they do? We want the Ark of the Covenant to go before us. So they sent for it. The people sent to Shiloh, and from there they carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of Hosts, who sits above the cherubim, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. I want to remind you, maybe some of you don't know, but I want to remind you what's inside that tent. By tent, I'm talking about this structure right here. This is the tabernacle. It's a replica to size of the tabernacle. This sits in Israel today. You'll notice it's not back then. There's a power pole right there. But this is the brazen altar where the animals would be killed, the sacrifices coming to Yahweh for sin, for guilt, for thanksgiving, for peace. All these things were killed or burned on this altar. The blood was spilled out. The carcasses were burned. The priest would take the offering, the blood. He would first pass by this bronze laver. This is a washing, Old Testament confession of sin, cleansing themselves physically and spiritually before entering the place, the tabernacle, which is this area right here. In the back third here, if I could cut this in thirds, the first 2/3 of this building are called the holy place. The back third of this building is called the Holy of Holies. It's the holiest, the most set apart, the most sacred place on all of the earth was in the back third of that building, because it was there that God said, I will dwell among my people. From behind that wall. Inside the first 2/3 of this building, there are pieces of furniture. These are them. There's the menorah. It's the golden lampstand. And every morning the priests or a Levite would go in there and fill up with oil the golden lampstand so that it would burn continually. That is inside and always was inside the first 2/3 of this tent, the tabernacle. There's also a table of showbread. You see it on the right there. And that table of showbread would hold 12 pieces of bread continually. They would be changed out every Sabbath. New bread, fresh bread would come in. Why 12? To represent the 12 tribes of Israel. One piece of bread for each of the tribes of Israel. Also in the first part of that, ignore that beautiful box with the eagles on it. The cherubim with the eagle's wings, the angels there. On the right side is what I want you to see. The high priest would also have inside that first 2/3 of the building this piece of furniture called the altar of incense. And as you read the rest of the Old Testament and even into the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews, the book of Revelation, that altar of incense represents the prayers of the saints wafting up to God. That smoke being lifted up as prayers to God. Among other things, I'm sure, but often the incense smoke is equated to the prayers of God, or the prayers of the saints going up to God. But inside that 1/3 part of the tabernacle, there's that piece of furniture, something that looks much like that. And that is called the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. I'm talking about this golden box made of acacia wood, covered with pure gold, chiseled out, carved out 2 angels, cherubim, whose wings touched each other. On the top surface of this, the lid of this ark, is what's called in the Bible the mercy seat. And it's from the mercy seat, or it's right here in between the cherubim and on the mercy seat, right here where the Shekinah glory, the presence of God, existed. That's what this box is. And the elders of Israel, who should know better, tells you how spiritually bankrupt Israel is. The elders of Israel, who should know better, say, let's go get the box and carry it into battle, surely with the good luck charm. Is this a good luck charm, or is this the dwelling place of Yahweh among His people? Eli, the high priest, is in charge of that tabernacle entirely. Whatever happens there, he's to blame for, or whatever happens there, he's to credit for. He is entirely in charge of it, and under his watchful eye, the elders of Israel and his 2 foolish sons, Hophni and Phinehas, come into the Holy of Holies, and they take the Ark of the Covenant. You know how often a priest, the high priest, could enter that back 1/3 of the tabernacle? You know how often they could do that? 1 day a year. For moments, not for the day, for brief moments to go in and sprinkle blood on the mercy seat on the Day of Atonement, the day the Jews celebrate as Yom Kippur. According to the Old Testament Mosaic law, 1 day a year, this site, this relic, this piece of furniture was so set apart to God, it was so holy on this earth, that even the high priest of Israel could only approach it 1 moment a year. And here we have the elders of Israel say, let's go get the box. Crazy, isn't it? I asked the question, is that what that ark was for? Let me show you a couple of verses concerning this Ark of the Covenant that the Israelites are using as a good luck charm. I'm going to ask you a question when I show you these 4 or 5 verses. I'm going to ask you where the ark is. I expect somebody to answer me. Where is it today? Not yet. You can think about it. Exodus chapter 25 verse 10 says this concerning the ark. This is God giving the instructions to Moses about how to build the tabernacle and what furniture to put in it, how to build it. These are the instructions in Exodus chapter 25. They shall construct an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 45 inches. Remember, a cubit is 18 inches. 45 inches, about this big. 1.5 cubits wide, 27 inches. 1.5 cubits tall, 27 inches. Almost the size of I say modern day, but in some of you ladies' days, you had a hope chest. About the size of the hope chest that was at the foot of your bed. A cedar chest, I would have called it growing up. That's about the size of this box. God says, you shall overlay it, this acacia wood construction, you shall overlay it with pure gold inside and out, you shall overlay it, and you shall make a gold molding around it. The next verse is verse 17, Exodus 25. You shall make a mercy seat. I tell you, this is the lid. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. It will be the lid for the box. Adorning the box, he says, you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. These are angels. A cherub is an angel. When you add I am on a Hebrew word, it makes it plural. When you add S to an English word, it makes it plural. That's all the I am is, it makes it plural. So it's not 1 cherub, it's cherubim. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, make them of hammered work at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And then in verse 20 it says, the cherubim shall have their wings spread upward, covering the mercy seat with their wings and facing one another. The faces of the cherubim are to be turned toward the mercy seat. I show you all these details because this just wasn't a box in Israel. God was extremely detailed about the construction of His dwelling. Verse 21 and 22 say this, you shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark. And inside the ark you shall put the testimony which I have given you. These are the 10 commandments, the stone tablets. That's the testimony that we're speaking of. Inside this ark, this box, you shall put the testimony which I will give you. At other times during Israel's history, there were 2 other items inside the box. Anybody remember what they are? For a time, Aaron's rod. Remember, he had a staff, Aaron's rod. Part of going before the Egyptian Pharaoh was that Aaron was to drop his rod. It would become a serpent. He'd pick it up again. It was a rod again. And then later, the people of Israel came in and said, why does Aaron get all the attention? We have people that could be priests also. And God called all the tribes together and said, put all your staffs, all of your leaders, put your staffs in, and the one that buds in the morning, he's the one I've chosen. These are dead pieces of wood. And it was Aaron's staff in the morning that budded with almond blossoms. It was Aaron's rod that budded, that God showed Israel, it is Aaron and his sons, and it will never be anybody else. For a time, Aaron's rod, the very one that budded, was also placed inside the Ark of the Covenant. There was one other thing in there. A pot of manna. Manna, the food that God fed the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness. As a representation of God's perfect provision, they were to put a pot of manna in the ark. I say they were there for a time because you get into New Testament times and some of the writings, and it says the only thing that was in there was the testimony. The tablets of the law. So where the other items went, only God knows. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony, the law of Moses, which I will give to you. And this is the significance of all of it. It's there where I will meet with you. He's speaking to Moses, but telling Moses, this is the place from above the mercy seat. This is the place where I will be. It's there where I will meet you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are upon the ark of the testimony, it's from there that I will speak to you. It was God's dwelling place. I will speak to you about all that I will give you in commandment for the sons of Israel. This isn't just a box that you can take into a battlefield. This was infinitely more than that. But that shows you the spiritual condition of Israel, that they have taken what God called holy and completely defiled it. Yahweh dwelled among Israel from above the mercy seat. We often call the Old Testament appearances of God the Shekinah glory. We get that word Shekinah from a Hebrew word skene, which means to dwell. It's His dwelling place. Of course, we serve a God that lives in heaven, that's all present everywhere, omnipresent. But when He speaks, when His visible representation is on earth, when He made Himself visible to Israel, it was from between those 2 cherubim on top of that mercy seat. That's where the pillar of fire would emanate from. That's where the pillar of cloud would emanate from. The bottom point would go exactly to that mercy seat. That's where God existed. It's where He showed Himself, His glory to the children of Israel, the mercy seat. And the ark was to stay then where? In the Holy of Holies. And one day a year, the high priest of Israel could go in there and make atonement for the sins of national Israel in just a few moments in one day of a year. And these guys have this thing, carrying it around like it's a good luck charm, a rabbit's foot. Let's traipse it off into battle with us. Among the worst moment of Jewish history. I say that a lot, don't I? I asked you a question at the beginning. Now's the time for the answer. Where is the Ark of the Covenant today? It's in a warehouse. Don't you remember the movie? It's deep in a warehouse, CIA protected. It's in a wooden box that says top secret on it. That's all a joke. But I bring this up. This is a picture from the movie, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. You see Harrison Ford there, Indiana Jones on the right with his whip, and you see a very, very good representation of what the Ark would look like. Even Hollywood got this part right. Spielberg, was it? Of what nationality? Jewish. Would he know what the Ark looked like? If he knew his Old Testament, he would. Interesting that he takes stories from Old Testament, 1 Samuel chapter 4. In the movie, I'll just say this quickly. In the movie, Adolf Hitler, is trying to find the Ark of the Covenant. That's what this movie is all about. Hitler and the Nazis are trying to find the Ark because Hitler believes that if he can carry it into battle, it will make his army invincible. Where did he get that idea? 1 Samuel chapter 4. If he could carry the ark into battle, it would make his armies invincible. Just like the foolish elders of Israel thought, if we can carry the ark into battle, it will make our army invincible. The truth of the matter is, when Nebuchadnezzar came into Jerusalem in 586 AD, when Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean, the Babylonian, came into Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, destroyed Solomon's temple, that ark was never seen again. It's simply lost to history. Men do not know where the Ark of the Covenant is. No man that lives knows where that box is. Don't know whether Nebuchadnezzar melted it down. Have no idea where it is. But if it exists, who does know where it is? God knows where his dwelling is. Very interesting piece of Jewish history. Where is that ark? So interesting that they're actually, look at the screen. They made movies about this box. The Lost, Raiders of the Lost Ark, because no one knows where it is. Archaeology's been trying for thousands of years to find this box. In the same way that archaeologists are trying desperately to find what else? On Mount Ararat, Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark, which was a boat, not an ark in the sense of a little wooden box, but nonetheless, God just won't let them be found. You know what men would do? They'd set up churches there and shrines, and they'd worship the wood of the ark. Just like they made wood into little idols, nothing would change. It wouldn't bring anybody closer to Yahweh, the living God, to find either of these items. That's my point. Verse 5 says, so the Ark of the Covenant, or as the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout so that the earth resounded. It's almost as if they were happy. The ark is with us. There's no way we can lose in battle. They should have shouted in horror because the ark wasn't being protected by Eli the high priest in its holy of holies in the tabernacle. But instead they see the ark and they shout. Let me ask you a question. Some of you may have this story in the back of your head and be puzzled by what I've said so far. Why did Israel take the ark into battle? Was there anything that happened in Jewish history that would have made Israel think, this is a good idea, we should take the ark into battle? Anything back there in your minds? Joshua, the conquest, Jericho, anything that might make you think, they've had that ark in battle before and they won. Let me show you the difference in this story. In Joshua chapter 6, verse 1 and 2, God is directing things. Israel is worshiping God behind Joshua. They've come into the land. They've crossed the Jordan River on dry ground. Remember, God dried up the Jordan River so Israel could pass. Just across the Jordan River, maybe a mile away, is the city of Jericho. I've seen it with my own eyes. You can clearly see it from the river. Right up on the bluff there, the city of Jericho, Israel has just gone in. They haven't established themselves. They haven't set up the tabernacle. The ark is a traveling piece. Kohath, the sons of Kohath, are carrying around the ark on shoulders at this time. And God says this. It says, now Jericho, the city of Jericho, was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. They were terrified of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. And Yahweh said to Joshua, so who is directing this? God himself is. Entirely different than what's happening in 1 Samuel 4, where men are directing everything, not turning to Yahweh at all. But Yahweh says to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and all the valiant warriors. The next verse says this. This is God's idea. At a time when the ark and all of the things that made up the tabernacle were traveling eventually to get to Shiloh to be set up. Not set up yet. God says to Joshua, you shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city once. You remember this story. You shall do so for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow their trumpets. I went over it very quickly. I hope you caught it. Before the ark. There was a time when in a battle scene, God had that ark leading the way. The 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in the presence of the ark of the covenant of God. You say, Rick, it doesn't say the ark of the covenant of God. Yes, it does. Keep reading. In Joshua chapter 6, verse 6. So I jumped 2 verses. So Joshua the son of Nun called the priest and said to them, God has told me this. I'm relaying this message. Take up the ark of the covenant. And let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. Again, why is it different? Why is the ark in battle here? Why is it different from 1 Samuel 4? Why are they chastised for what they did, but this generation behind Joshua 300 years earlier did this? Because Israel was following Yahweh spiritually in the days of Joshua. It was a high point of Israel as they went into the land in the conquest. It's the opposite in 1 Samuel chapter 4. Israel is not following Yahweh spiritually. In Joshua's day, it was Yahweh, as we've seen. Yahweh said to Joshua, it was Yahweh directing and Israel following. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, it's the opposite. It's the elders of Israel directing and the people following them, but Yahweh's name's nowhere. The prophet Samuel's name's not anywhere. Nobody's going to Samuel and says and asking, will you please check with Yahweh? What does he want us to do? No one's going to the high priest Eli because his priesthood is shambles, and so are his children. And remember, at this time, the tabernacle has not been set up yet. It is a traveling bunch of pieces. And the Lord chooses, because the Lord can choose what he wants, to move the ark in front of these priests as they circle the city 7 days. One more question. I'm looking at the clock. We've got to stop. But one more question. Look back in 1 Samuel 4, verse 5. As the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout. Bring back any memories? All Israel shouted with a great shout. You think that was part of the rabbit's foot, rubbing that foot? If we shout out loud, maybe the walls of Jericho will fall a second time? I skipped a verse. Look what it says in Joshua 6, verse 5. It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. Exact same Hebrew phrase. The people shouted with a great shout. And the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up every man straight ahead. It worked once, but only at the direction of God. This was God's plan to destroy Jericho. It wasn't a military battle. It was a battle between God and the false gods of Jericho. And God wanted to show Israel in their very first battle, I fight Israel's battles. I'll do this alone, single-handedly. I will lead you and show you how we should continue in battle. Me leading, you following. And in that event, the people shouted with a great shout because that's what God wanted them to do. I wonder in the days of in the days of Samuel here, 1 Samuel 4, because their heart wasn't in it, their motivation wasn't right. They weren't following Yahweh into anything. They were just rubbing a rabbit's foot, bringing the box into the battlefield. I wonder if the shout was simply a superstitious shout. If we do it the way they did back then, maybe it'll work again. Maybe we'll have the same result that they did then. Maybe God will defeat this superior army. And so you have this great shout of a bunch of people who aren't worshiping Yahweh. Exactly what you see here. They weren't right with Yahweh the way Joshua's army was 300 years before. They were just going through the motions, hoping to have the same result. Very clear in the hearts of Israel. This isn't worship, friends. This is wishing. Just hoping against hope that if they bring the ark and they shout out loud, maybe they'll have the same result as they had before. We've got to stop for time. Let's close in prayer. We'll pick up here in verse 6 next time and see how the Philistines respond to the ark of the Lord being in the camp. Preview, they're terrified by it. Israel brings it in like a rabbit's foot. The Philistines see it and are shaking. Why does it have to be that way and not the opposite? Let's close in prayer. Father,